Leadership debuffs are especially good against low leadership factions forcing earlier routes, but if you stack those leadership debuffs high enough, even high leadership factions can feel the pain. Today I'll be using Dardy Singh's leadership debuff build and add my own twist to it, using a couple more abilities and spells to counteract the high leadership of the cornered army. So for the army core, we have Lokir Felhard coming in with his Merciless Slaver ability that adds -6 leadership to surrounding units, and then the Kharibdyss providing a -8 leadership in terms of Abyssal Howl. Now, this is not the end because we have more leadership debuffs, one of them the Sorceress of Death coming in with Doom and Darkness, -16 leadership. If overcast, you can use it as an area of effect spell. And on top of that, we have the Kena Assassin. Not a common pick in the meta, but he does have one ability that is key to this build, the Black Lotus. This one-time use ability imbues the Discourage contact effect on the Kena Assassin, adding another -16 leadership debuff. So theoretically, I can do a maximum -46 leadership debuff to my enemy's units. Now for the rest of the army build here, we have a front line of Bleak Swords, in the skies a couple Harpies, one of them the Crows of Cain with their regenerating ability. On the flanks we have some Cohen Knights for their anti-large armor piercing, 2 on each flank, 4 in total. On the other side of the battlefield, the Khorne army, a front line of Bloodletters and some Chaos Warriors, one of them with Halberd. At the back there, a single unit of Kharibdyss Chariot and a single unit of Minotaurs of Khorne. On the far flank, a couple Blood Crushers of Khorne, supported by a single unit of Flesh Hounds. Leadership-wise, we have a single Herald of Khorne coming in with his Juggernaut, providing some solid melee attack buffs. And that's it for the army builds. Now let's go into the battle itself and see how this leadership debuff combo works in practice. Despite having one of the best Dragon Lords in the game, the Dark Elf's monstrous presence is quite lacking in terms of regular units, especially the Kharibdyss having a similar animation as the Hydra but having none of those regeneration benefits. Sure, the Kharibdyss might have anti-large, but it is also more vulnerable. For the rest of the army, I'm maneuvering some of the Cohen Knights to the left, hoping to counteract my opponent's heavy cavalry here, the 2 Blood Crushers and the Flesh Hounds, while on the right I'll be leaving 1 Cohen Knight in case the Kharibdyss Chariots try to do something funny. As for the infantry, they're slowly marching towards each other. I'm shifting the formations a bit so that I'll be focusing the push on the left flank. It will take a little bit of time before we actually come into contact, while the Kena Assassin will be shooting at the Bloodletters of Khorne, picking out some of their HP. At the beginning of the battle, we can see that the leadership debuff has been deployed, a Discouraged by Ability -14 debuff to all surrounding units. These Bloodletters are not breaking just yet. Even with the Doom and Darkness -16 leadership, they still are barely holding on. However, this is where the Harpy rear charge comes in. As soon as they make contact with the Bloodletters, the attack from their rear leadership debuff will lead to a massive spike in leadership. -14, combined with the shock damage from the rear charge, the Bloodletters are being forced into crumbling territory. Doom and Darkness normally breaks units, but on units that fade away or crumble, it is essentially a direct damage spell if you can actually push the leadership into negatives. And with that, the Bloodletters are gone. Now we'll be moving on to the Minotaurs. However, the Minotaurs are not routing just yet, and the Doom and Darkness is about to end, so here is where the Black Lotus from the Kena Assassin comes in. The Discourage contact effect should be able to keep the Minotaur's leadership low, even if the Doom and Darkness spell runs out. On top of that, with all the debuffs, the leadership value of the Minotaurs are less than half of their base value, meaning that their frenzy is no longer active. Now, despite the Doom and Darkness has worn off, the damage sustained by the Minotaurs means that they will be broken off from the engagement, leading to a collapse of the entire Khorne middle section. This leaves the Herald of Khorne on his Juggernaut alone in the fight, being surrounded by Lokir Felhard and the Kharibdyss, being debuffed by the Assassin's Trophy and hit by Lokir with his fully buffed stats. This Khorne demon is not having a good time. On the flanks there, I'm too focused on the middle here and kind of left my Cohen Knights in neglect. Some of them got charged down by the combination of Blood Crushers and Flesh Hounds. The Cohen Knights here peeled off but will be charging back in to try and utilize the charge bonus and also Murderous Prowess, buffing up their attack. The other Cohen Knights here is doing just fine, fighting against the Blood Crushers, they took quite a bit of damage initially, but with Murderous Prowess buffing up their damage output, they will start trade evenly again, especially when more Koa Knights are coming in to reinforce. On the right flank there, well, I said right flank, but the real right flank has collapsed, the middle section here. My single entities, despite taking some damage, are still doing just fine. The Herald will soon get banished back into the warp, while the Bloodletters here are taking some direct damage from the Doom and Darkness, because the spell has forced them into disintegrating territory. The demon disintegration mechanic is more punishing than the undead crumbling, so this is actually some very effective damage. The Khorne warriors with halberds are kind of lost right now. They're pushing on the left, but all my units broke on that side and they're now seeking another engagement. Theoretically, they want to fight a Kharibdyss, but the Bloodletters that are holding my single entities in place are no longer holding. And once the Bloodletters are dealt with, I'll be pulling out my single entities to deal with the remaining Chaos Warriors, who are not doing too hot in terms of leadership as well, taking quite a bit of attrition damage throughout the course of battle. On the left flank, the Blood Crushers, one of them has crumbled, the other one now being overwhelmed by 3 whole units of Code 1 Knight. Well, not 3 whole units after all the casualties, but more than enough to crush these Blood Crushers. Get it? Anyways. With the Blood Crushers going down, the Chaos Warriors with halberds are the only pocket of resistance for Khorne. They're trying to catch up with my single entities, but the elven characters are swift and agile. The Chaos Warriors with their heavy armor are struggling to keep up, especially when debuffed by poison from the Kena Assassin's missiles. The Khorne infantry are not giving up just yet, but unfortunately their effort will be in vain, while all my rest of the units are just chasing down, picking apart my opponent's isolated forces. The Kharibdyss chariots here now being swarmed by Koa Knights will not be holding in combat for too long, while my single entities are just pulling away. Now let's go back into fast forward now, as the Kharibdyss chariot will be routed, and with the halberd units being moved back to deal with the Koa Knights, my single entities are charging straight into the isolated Bloodletters, doing some really nice impact damage, putting a dent in their leadership. Of course, they do not tear ROUT, but once they start crumbling due to leadership issues, especially with their Lord dead, they will not be holding for too long. The Minotaurs will be regrouping from their ROUT and charging into combat as well, but they're mostly out of combat the entire game, so they didn't manage to do too much damage throughout the course of battle. And now with another Overcast Doom and Darkness covering both the Bloodletters and Minotaurs, they will be breaking away. The Khorne halberd is still very healthy, but at this point it doesn't matter anymore, because army losses has dictated that Khorne has been defeated, and the low-tier Kharibdyss combo shall be claiming this victory. With my build in the battle, the highest leadership debuff we can get is -46, but that is not the final form, because if we add a Bloodwrack Shrine into the build, who does have an ability of -4 leadership debuff with Aura of Agony, now suddenly we can do a maximum of -50 leadership. Of course, that is only in theory, because in practice this is not great. First of all, 5 single entities is not allowed in tournament builds. And secondly, having so many expensive single entities means that your build would be kind of narrow and would be in a disadvantage in general. Either way, still a pretty fun combo if you want to fool around on ranked multiplayer. Usually, leadership debuffs are best used against low leadership factions, making them easier to rout, but this debuff stack is strong enough that even against high leadership factions like other elves, it will still work. Take this mirror match for example. The Dread Spears got routed as soon as the Doom and Darkness hit them, and then when the Kharibdyss side charged another Dread Spear alongside Lokir's Slaver debuff, the next unit of Dread Spears will also be broken off. This gives my Bleak Swords a very favorable engagement, chasing down the routed Dread Spears as my single entities work on other units, like the Hydra. Right now, the Doom and Darkness spell is on cooldown, but that is why we have a Black Lotus as a backup. The Kena Assassin will come in and smack the Hydra in the face, triggering that Discourage effect. One notable thing is that this effect is also applicable to the Kena Assassin's missile, so it can be applied from afar. While this leadership combo doesn't directly do damage, it does disable your opponent's units, preventing them from fighting back, giving you a chance to do some free damage to them, chasing them down as they flee. However, this build still have a major weakness, and that is the need for a Kharibdyss and also not being able to pick a Dark Sorceress Lord. The Lord part isn't the biggest problem because low-tier Felhard is still a decent Lord choice, however Kharibdyss is the real issue. It is an expensive monster piece with mediocre battle performance, draining away a lot of your resources, and the only thing that is going for it is the leadership aura. Take this battle for example, because of all the investment into the single entities, I was not able to field a wide army, and a narrow army against the Skaven means that their firepower, the weapons teams can easily focus down all my key units, while the chaff are delaying my advance. The Kharibdyss is eventually grind down by the sheer number of Skaven infantry, while my characters was not able to fight through all those chaff while being psycho-charged by ROUT from behind. Lokir's leadership debuff did help me to rout off a lot of the Skaven infantry, but the lack of numbers on my end means that I wasn't able to counter such a wide Skaven build. This build is also much less effective when your opponent doesn't rout. Against Kislev for example, the Barrel Blood effect means that the units will still fight on despite Doom and Darkness and all the leadership debuffs dropping their leadership down to the negatives. If this is a regular Kislev build with more Bear Cavalry and armor-piercing missiles on the field, my single entities would be easily focused down. Similarly, this build doesn't work against the Undead because Crumbling does minuscule damage to the Undead armies. The Demon's fading mechanic is more punishing, so this can still be effective against demon armies, but against the Undead, this combo is definitely out of the question. Overall, I would say this Dark Elf build is very fun to play with, especially good at breaking battle lines and forcing early routes of enemies. Massive thanks to Darty Singh for sending me this build idea, and now let's quickly wrap up with the post-battle performance. For the Dark Elves here, you can see that none of the units really earned back their worth, as they were failing to do too much damage other than this one single unit of Koan Knights and also one unit of the Bleak Swords down below. The rest of the units didn't do too much damage because most of that was done in the form of disintegration from all those Bloodletters and the Herald of Khorne, all thanks to the leadership debuffs forcing them to break down earlier than usual. As for the Khorne army, the Bloodletters still did some pretty good damage, however, being forced to get off the battlefield early, two of them were not able to earn back their cost. For the rest of the army here, the Herald got wrecked, being gooned by multiple single entities and the Chaos Warriors. The Halberds didn't really get into a proper fight, while the regular Chaos Warriors got some good damage grinding through my Bleak Swords. The thing is, the Minotaurs with great weapons were out of action most of the time because they were forced off by an early rout. For the rest of the mobility though, the Gorby's Chariots didn't get a good trade against the Koan Knights. The Blood Crushers got a much better trade, but eventually got overwhelmed by the Armor Piercing and Anti-Large. Same goes for the Flash Hounds. And yeah, that's all for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed this wild army build, and if you want to see more Total Warhammer content, be sure to subscribe to my channel and keep an eye out for new video uploads. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.